Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ma.
Good morning,
Morning.
ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. So my name is Dr. Swala Fidelia. I
Morning,
will.
ma'am.
Good morning. Can we all now mute ourselves if we? Okay. So my name is Dr. Swala Fidelia. I'll be taking a very short aspect of the course, the 102. And I'll be taking aspects of adaptations. Adaptation. So my slides then, now we can see. There's a lot of noise there. Can we just mute ourselves? Can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right. So I'll be taking the aspect of adaptations. And we want to look at adaptations in mammals. So the first question is, what is a mammal? You and I, we are mammals. The reason why we are mammals is because we have unique characteristics that makes us fall into that class of animals. And the basic and the unique characteristics that makes us fall into the class of the mammals is because we have a mammary gland. That means a gland that produces milk. So any animal that has the potentials of producing milk from their breast is a mammal. That's the most important characteristics. So a bat is a mammal. A whale is a mammal. A dolphin is a mammal. So, and human beings are mammals. The reason why they are mammals is because they have the mammary gland. Is it clear? Now, in this topic, I'm going to look at the features that makes organisms, especially humans, able to adapt to their environment when there are changes. Now, when you talk about adaptation, it means you are trying to adopt a nature or a kind of attribute that will make you survive in your environment. Now, it is an evolutionary process because it takes time and it takes duration of ages to be able to develop these characteristics that makes the animal able to survive in the environment. So our main focus in this topic is basically going to be on mammals. And we are going to focus mostly on humans because you're just coming in. So we're not going to overload you. By the time you get to 200 level, 300 level, then we're going to diversify on this same topic. So on the mammals, like I said, that one of the unique characteristics that makes an animal termed a mammal is because it has milk-producing gland. And other factors includes hairs on the body. So why I did not mention hair in the first place is because there are some other animals that are not mammals that also has hairs on their body. Okay, so the question you might even ask me is, does it mean whales have hairs on their body? Does it mean sharks have hairs on their body? Does it mean the dolphins have hairs on their body? Well, it does not mean that the hairs will have to cover all aspects of their body, but it shows that there will be in either all parts of their body or selected parts of their body that will show that there is hair. So if you look at the mouth part of the whales or the dolphins, you will see that they have little brittle-like hairs. But what really makes them more of a mammal is because they can produce milk. So the question is, why do mammals need to undergo adaptation? Because they need to survive. For instance, if you were living in a place, okay, let me tell you something. If you take, for example, people that are living in Munshi and people that are living in Ajegule and people who are living in Lekki, if there's a shootout, the most people that will survive are people that are living in the most densely populated areas, because they have learned over time, they have evolved over time, the characteristics that makes for survival. Because all their lives, they have been exposed to those kind of reactions. Why the lucky child might not be able to survive. So the essence of adaptation is for survival. Now, the second reason why adaptation is necessary is for reproduction. You know, there are 9 characteristics that makes living organisms survive in an environment. And one of that characteristic, and the most important one, is reproduction. Because if there is no proliferation or a next generation, then the organism is wiped out. So it's very important that there is sustainability of the environment in terms of population for that organism to exist. If not, it will go on extinction. So, and you know that in the environment, every organism is very important because they play a role in the food web or the food chain. So reproduction is why organisms or animals have to adopt or get a kind of characteristics that will make them survive in their environment. Then the third reason why adaptation is very important is because in the environment, we say that the environment is a space in time because there are a lot of changes that are going on in the environment. And as these changes occur, animals are expected to be able to adjust to these changes. So because of the changes that occur at every time t, then organisms need to also adjust to fall in tandem with the changes that also occurs in the environment. So these are the things why we require adaptation. 1, for survival. 2, for reproduction. 3, for adjustment to environmental changes. Then, why are humans unique in adaptability? Because humans are the only ones that have channeled themselves biologically and culturally to have some adaptive features that are key to their success. So other animals might not be able to survive, but humans, they always find a way of survival. Now, mammals have also, human inclusive as mammals, evolved different forms of adaptive measures so that they be able to thrive in the environment. However, humans stand out in these various combinations, and that is why we're going to focus mainly on the humans and how they're able to adapt in the environment And that is why we say the humans are the most successful species in the environment, because their adaptability is on the key point, is very high. Now, types of adaptations in animals. There are three main categories of adaptations: behavioral adaptation, structural stroke physical adaptation, physiological adaptations, and these attributes, whether behavioral, structural, physiological, is what makes animals to thrive more in the environment. And what kind of environment are we looking at? There are varied types of environments, from the marine, the oceans, the water environment, from the hydrosphere to the deserts, to the Arctic, and to tundra. These animals exist in everywhere. Mammals occupy every part of the sphere of the environment. Mammals live on the ground, they live in water, right? And even in the air, like the bats, they fly in the air. So we have different environments. And for that reason, the different mammals we find there. Oluwole, mute yourself. The different mammals we find there, Blessing, mute yourself. The different animals we find there are able to survive in that environment. So we're going to pick them one by one. What is behavioral adaptations in mammals? Now, by definition, we say that behavioral adaptation has to do with actions. For instance, just taking a cue from the example I made initially on the Munshi, Ajagule's child and the Lekki child. So you find out that the behavior of people in different locations, even within Lagos, differs. The way a child who was brought up in Munshi would behave is different from the way a child who was brought up in Lekki would behave because of the environment. So you find out that when you talk about behavior, you're looking at the actions. And the actions they take. Now, these actions, somebody is talking there, please mute yourself. These actions or behaviors is what actually makes them to survive. So how do they take that behavior? What makes them have that kind of behavior? It's because of the environment. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So these actions, this behavior, they are learned. Sometimes when they are continuously learned, it becomes innate in them. They become acclimatized to that condition. You find animals, they are very active. Because that action they are taking is learned because they want to survive in the environment. Sometimes you now see that these animals may be able to respond quickly. Immediately changes occur in the environment. So sometimes this behavioral pattern is as a result of learned actions. Or sometimes it becomes instinctive. So in a 300 level, you're going to learn something on animal behavior. That's where you're going to see how different animals behave based on circumstances. So I'm going to give you some examples of non-human mammals. Like I told you that mammals, There are animals that are mammals, like the shark, the dolphins, the whales, bats. They are non-human. Okay, so I will start with examples of behavioral changes that can occur because of actions that exist in the non-human mammals. The first one I'll look at is a nocturnality in animals. When you talk about nocturnality, it talks about animals that are able to be more active in the night. That means they are nocturnal. The bat is nocturnal. The kangaroo rats, they are nocturnal animals. So there are specific animals that are very active in the night. Why are they active in the night? Because they are always faced with predation. So normally, most animals will vacate in the night. We talking in the night. But here and now, you see animals that are very small. So what they do in order to survive, if not, the larger animals that are active in the day will feed on them. They now come out in the night. That's a behavioral adaptation. And this you can see in so many animals. So take time to look at some mammals that are non-humans that has the attributes of nocturnality. Then the second one is pack hunting. Now, one of the behaviors that animals such as wolves endorse in their characteristics is that they go hunting together. That way, they'll be able to capture a prey or more than one. Now, when they congregate together, it improves their ability to become predators. So it improves their ability to catch more animals. The reason is this: when they go singly, the animals they want to predate on will be able to overcome them. So, but when they come together, they'll be able to capture more animals. So if you can imagine droves, you can imagine herds of cattle moving in one direction, and one wolf comes to prey on them. It's not going to be possible. So what will happen is that the cattle might even overcome the wolf. But when they are in packs, yes, they'll be able to hunt and become successful in capturing other organisms. So that is another behavior. So they move together. It's just like saying a student that is not brilliant will now move in the midst of those that are brilliant. Before you know it, the one that is not brilliant starts to become what? Brilliant. That is a behavioral character. And that is also what is depicted in the wolves. The third example is the behavior of migration. When we talk about migration, it means that an animal will leave a particular area A to another area B and comes back to that particular area again, A. That is what we call migration. Migration does not mean that you move and don't come back. Migration means you move from one point and come back to that particular point. No matter how many years, the animal will still find its way back. So the question is, why do we have to migrate? Now, when there are seasons in the year that some animals cannot survive, probably there is the prevalence of mosquito. There is high incidence of hunting, or the weather is very cold. Such situations might not be good enough for the animals to survive. So what the animals will do is to move away from that area that is uncomfortable to a place that they can utilize that will be more comfortable for the animals. So migration becomes a behavioral adaptation. And you can find this in whales. When they want to breed, they move away from fast-flowing waters to slow-moving waters. Some caribou, when there's incidents of mosquito that kills their young, they have to leave that place because their young might not be able to survive the infestation of mosquitoes and other insects. And so they will have them when they are now strong enough and the season does not favor those insects, they now come back again. That's a behavioral adaptation. A fourth one is hibernation or tupo. Here it's on hibernation. We use it in English. I'm hibernating. That means you want to tuck in. You want to just go and hide. Okay? Now, in hibernation, animals also move into hiding so as to conserve energy. This is because in hibernation, probably it's winter. And animals, when it's terribly cold, all animals have a hiding place. So the animals that those bears will feed on, they're no longer available. Every animal has gone into hiding. So what do? They have to go into a state of tupo, a state where there is less activity. Why? So that they will not conserve, they will not make use of a lot of energy, because food is a source of energy. So when there is no food to eat, what will happen? They will die off. So in that case, because the animals that they depend on, they are not available anymore, they have to go into hiding so that they will not need to work hard. They will not expend a lot of energy. In that way, they conserve their energy until the weather or the winter period goes off. So that also is a behavioral adaptation. Now, let's look at humans. How do humans use behavioral adaptation to survive in the environment? Now, we have what is called cultural adaptation. Here, humans make use of tools. They use clothing and shelter. How do they do that? Those days, the caveman made use of his hands for walking. As advancement occurs, you start to use tools. You use machines that makes your work easier. Instead of using your cutlass, your hoe, and all these to walk a whole acre of land, with just a simple machine, it will be able to do that in few seconds. When there is cold, humans will use different kinds of clothing to be able to cover so as to feel warm. It starts from period, dates back in olden days where people would go naked with few clothing. But as the weather changes, climate change, then they start wearing clothing to keep warm. Then they start, instead of sleeping out, they start making shelter. And there are different kinds of shelter we find now, depending on the area you find yourself, so that the humans there will be able to survive. Humans started making use of fire for cooking. Normally, when they cook this food, it's well preserved. It makes the food, instead of eating cold food, the other way they can adjust is to warm up the food. That way, the bacteria or the microorganisms will die off. And so they will not eat the food cold with the microorganism in it. Humans also have developed the behavioral attributes of deterrence or deterring predators. With the fire, animals were afraid to come close to humans. So they put up a fire, and then those animals that would have liked to predate on humans will have to go away because there's fire in front of the shelter. Then there is the attitude of agriculture. That's a way of survival from starvation. So now humans have developed the habits or behavior of agriculture, that is culturing of plants and animals. So they don't wait for the weather to bring the food to maturity. In this Lagos, I see that you can eat corn all through the season. That means all they need to do is to culture and provide the parameters, physicochemical parameters that is required for growth of those species of corn. And you can have corn all through the year. So there's nothing stopping you. So you don't have to wait when it is season for corn to eat corn. So there's also civilization using more advanced tools for farming. So these are behavioral attributes that humans have exhibited in order to survive in the environment. Now, the second aspect of adaptation is the structural aspect. The structural aspect has to do with the physical changes, the morphological changes, the obvious changes that we see in the animals, whether they are non-humans or humans. Now, by definition, when we talk about structural change adaptation, we mean changes that occur in the body structure, which makes animals to be able to live or inhabit an environment. So like I did in the first stage when I looked at the non-human mammals, I'm also going to do that in this case. So let's take some examples of the non-human mammals. So one of the first examples we're going to look at this morning is the polar bears. The polar bears, if you can envision how the polar bear looks like, or after the class, you can Google and look at what a polar bear looks like. You see that they're very fat, and you will see that they have a thick fur, a thick covering all aspects of their body. Now, these animals have evolved this structure because in the environment where you find the polar bears, it's very cold in the Arctic regions, very, very, very cold. So how will they survive? So they have this thick fur, which causes warmth. They covers all aspects of the body. But actually, what gives them more insulation is the fact that the polar bears have what we call blubber. They have fat underneath their skin. And this fat causes heat. It generates heat within the body system. So with that fat, the animal will be able to survive with a covering on it, which is the thick fur. So that is a body structural change. So here you can see that the body is covered with a thick fur, and just beneath the skin, it has fat. And you know, fat it easily induces heat, all right? Then we have the camels. The camels have evolved padded feet. And this padded feet is because they have to move through a long period of rough edges. So what they do is the feet has to be padded. That means has hooves that are very thick. It also protects them from environmental changes. They also have a hump. That is the what do you call this shoulder hunchback.
Mhm.
All right. And it has the fats also, which it uses to store energy. All right. Now, if you look at the dolphins, the dolphins have a streamlined structure. The reason why they have a streamlined structure is to prevent friction during swimming. So their body is tapered, narrowed down, slippery. It passes through the water without resistance. Another feature it has is that the dolphins also have fats in their liver. So that fat also helps to insulate the animals. Then we have animals such as the giraffe. The giraffe has a long neck. The essence of that long neck is to be able to reach out for food easily. So those food that are low hanging, that could be plucked by other animals that are smaller, if it is hanging on the top level, then it will be difficult to get it. So in order to get such fruits, animals that have longer necks will be able to reach them easily. So that is why the dolphins have longer neck. Human examples of structural adaptation is the skin pigmentation, where we have melanin. So if you see an albino, it does not have melanin. And that is why they are easily affected by sunlight, because the melanin normally helps to prevent wearing off or damages of the tissues. So when you see somebody who has a high level of melanin, the person is normally dark in complexion because the melanin level is very high. So one of the ways humans try to protect themselves from exposure of ultraviolet rays is to have melanin in their system. So this melanin will help to cordon off damages that would have come as a result of ultraviolet radiation. The second one is the body proportion. Humans have shorter limbs in animals that exist in the cold climes, while the longer limbs goes for the hot climes. Now, this is explained by the theory that was postulated by Ellis. We call it the Ellis rule. This topic will be expatiated on when you get to 200 levels. So just know that animals, humans like us, those, if you measure our limbs, those who stay in cold climes have shorter limbs than those who stay in hotter climes. Then we have bipedalism. Bipedalism is also a way where we can store energy. So we have our two hands and we have two legs. And these hands are free. In that case, our hands can be used to manipulate tools. So we can use our hands to walk, we can use our legs to walk. That way, there is better heat regulation. In that way, humans have also adopted all this. Physiological adaptation. Physiological adaptation has to do with changes in the internal body structures. So what are the internal body functions that are changing? So let's take another example of the bears. The bears are able to reduce metabolic rate in the winter. Like I said, the bears have fat just beneath their skin. And they also have able to reduce the cold environment because they are also having the ability to do what is called counter-current heat exchange. And this is because of the fat that is embodied just within the skin of the animals. The penguins, they also have the ability to retain heat in the environment because they also have a liver that is fat-filled. And they have pore coverings, which assist them in terms of the structural perspective. But if you look at the physiological adaptations, you find out that the penguins have a liver that is filled with fat. Then we have the brandycardia mammals. These are mammals that are found in the marine environment. They make use of oxygen for breathing. So what they do is, to be able to have enough oxygen for respiration, they dive. They do what is called diving. They do a lot of continuous diving. That way stirs up the oxygen, which they use for consumption in respiration. Why humans? Those who stay in the high altitudes, if you profile their red blood cell, you will notice that they have high red blood cells. So these are people who are able, just like the Ethiopians, you can see they can run a long distance. It's not because they are stronger. You know, they live in mountainous areas, so their red blood cells are numerous in terms of number. So, and you know that the red blood cell also helps in oxygen generation. So they help in the breakdown of oxygen. So the more red blood cells you have, the better. So people who live in high altitudes, such as Tibetans, have the ability to survive because their red blood cells is quite huge in terms of number. Humans also adapt to changes in the environment. For example, when it is hot, humans will sweat. Now, sweating is another physiological change that humans use to be able to survive in a hot environment. So they have a very effective thermoregulatory ability in the hot climes. The reason is this. The blood cells carry heat. They carry heat in the body system of humans. So when it is hot, the flow of blood will be gushing straight into the skin so that it opens the sweat glands to secretion of sweat, so that as the body emits sweat, it loses water and ions and salts in the process, but causes a cooling effect in the body. So when you are sweating, it's because the body wants to adjust to the hot temperature. So when you clean your sweat, you find that you are cooler within. Okay? So there's also what we call persistence of lactase. Now, persistence of lactase, lactase is an enzyme that digests lactose. Now, I find that digesting lactose into adulthood is one of the characteristics that humans use as a physiological change in the system. Now, let's look at some case studies of human adaptation. In Sami, in it, these are areas where we have very cold climes, very cold. So such animals, they have very stocky bodies. They eat high fat diets so that they will have a lot of heat, fat in their system that will insulate the body. And these people also have clothing. Their clothing are thicker, all right? Another case is the Tibetans, which I mentioned, and the Andes. These are people, they have high level of hemoglobin. They have cultural techniques, new cultural techniques. They also have increased lung capacity. Because if you live in the altitudes, you find out that you will need more oxygen. So without the high level of hemoglobin, it will not be able to survive. So that's one case study. Then we also look at the case study of humans in terms of their brain size. So it's been noticed from research that the brain size of humans are larger. And the larger your brain size, the more you're able to solve problems. Not only are the brains larger, we have diversity of language. So these are human cognitives that makes them survive in the environment. You know, we talked about bipedalism, where they're able to use their hands and their legs to be able to walk. They make use of tools. And if you look at the disposition of the human hand, you see that the thumb is in opposition to the other fingers. This is for ability to be able to grip tools and to be able to walk faster. I watched a documentary. I saw a family that has 6 fingers. And they interviewed the family and they were asking why they didn't amputate one of the fingers. And they said they wanted it as a form of identification. That's one. 2, that they are more effective. They can handle tools having more fingers, having 6 fingers. So the disposition of the thumb makes for precision of duty. Then we also have technological adaptations. Here we look at farming, from using your cutlass to using advanced machines, shelter, from using just the bamboo, you have your cement, clothing, thicker clothing or lighter clothing, depending on the environment. Then we'll talk about our diets. Now, you would have seen that some animals during the cold season, they eat a lot of fat. Now, humans have also adapted dietary changes by looking at the diversibility of taking 2 types. They can eat plants, they can eat animals. They are called the omnivores because they can eat plants and animals, okay? They eat a variety of food. So one human can eat plant, one human can eat animals. And they can do that because if you look at their dentition, you know, we have the molar, the premolar, canine, and all that. All these structures of the teeth pay a particular function. Some used for cutting, some for grinding, some for making sure that it's smoothly grinded before it is swallowed. So the dentition of humans is diverse. So for that reason, it can cut meat, it can grind anything. So it makes them more predisposed to be omnivores in their feeding habits. Then, like I said, they also have the ability to cook their food. So they cook their food. One, remember, if the food is cold, it has a lot of microorganisms. which will be harmful to the animals. But here we are. Because of the cooking of the food, when it's heated up, one, it is warm for consumption. Two, it kills off those microorganisms. Three, it can also help for preservation in terms of food scarcity. So with this kind of technology behind our humans, they are able to conserve and survive in the environment. So let's have some questions now. Do I have any question? Any question for me? Ayobami.
No, ma.
Go on.
Okay, thank you, ma. I would appreciate it if you kindly re-explain that body's proportion when we talked about structural adaptation for Allen's rule or something like that.
Let me go there.
Yeah,
This one.
yes.
Okay, where?
Under human examples for body proportion. Yeah, this one.
Okay. So
Thank you.
according to, we're working on the principles of those researchers that have done and established a finding. Hellings is an author that has looked at humans from different areas. And he came to the conclusion that animals that stays in colder climates, if you measure their limbs means hands and the legs, they're always shorter. If you measure the limbs of those that are in the hotter climes, one of the structural change is that it's longer. And that is because of the weather. The colder the weather, according to Allen's rule, the colder the weather, the shorter the limbs. Is it clearer?
Yes, ma. Thank you, ma.
Any other question? Any other question? Okay. In the absence of any other question, because I left some time for questions, I'll call it a day. So we meet another day. Thank you. I'll finish my lectures for today. So we can leave. Thank you for coming.
Ma, please, are you going to share the slide?
Yes, definitely you have to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, God bless. Bye. Come and
Bye.
see.
Hello, ma. Hello, ma.
Yes.
Ma, because of attendance, like, are you taking attendance for this class?
Yes, I am.
Okay, ma, thank you.
Okay.
Who is this person that
So, ma, how will you take the attendance? You should drop our name in chat box.
Yes. I will also snap it from here.
Okay.
I'll also snap it from here.
A lot of people that was unable to enter.
No
What
wahala.
about people on you?
No wahala. No wahala.
Ma, the
We
people
normally no wahala. You don't have a car. I'll capture those that are on. That's all.
But please,
But
what
what
about
about
people
You
people